Thank you, Hasif. That was a very long introduction. It embarrasses me a little bit. So, Assalamualaikum, salam sejahtera, everyone. First of all, thank you for taking the time, for your attendance and taking the time to join us in this webinar. As Hasif has already informed you, and I suppose since the announcement was just made a few days ago about my appointment as the CEO of MTCC, replacing Mr. Yong Teng Kun, I received, a pouring of congratulatory messages, support, and encouragement from many of our stakeholders, and I feel very honored and humbled by the support that I received. As you know, in 2015, the Malaysian cabinet has approved a policy that set a target of 30% women representation in decision-making positions across all Malaysian public listed companies by 2020. We are actually behind the target, but I'm glad to note that I probably be contributing, to that statistics in trying to improve the gender balance of decision-making representation of female, and this importance is increasingly recognized, across the world. So I appreciate, your participation here and all the support that you have given me. So this afternoon, as Aziz has mentioned, we will be discussing about environmental social governance, its importance, requirements, and the role of certification under the MTCS in delivering the commitments of ESG. So our aim for the webinar is to familiarize players in the commodity sector, the public, our stakeholders, on the ESG as a relatively new initiative or buzzword in the efforts to guide businesses to adopt sustainability in their operation, which is much similar to the aims of our aim in certification. I have a very short presentation that I will just give a short introduction about MTCS, what we do, before I give the floor to Ms. Pang to tell us more about what is this new buzzword that we are hearing about, ESG, which is mentioned so many times also in the recent, what do you call that, a Malaysia plan announced by the Prime Minister recently. I'll share my slide. Okay, this one. All right, can you see my slide? Okay.
Sorry, Cik Siti.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, clear now.
Now we can see it. Okay.
Okay. All right. So sorry. So those in the forestry industry would probably be familiar in the forest sector. Basically, would be familiar with this cycle of sustainable forest management. I'm not sure whether you are aware or not. Actually, forestry is the oldest industry that actually takes into account sustainability. The first term, the term sustainability was first coined in Germany in the 18th century. Actually, it was first appeared in the Handbook of Forestry, published in 1713. So that's far back as 200 years ago. That the term sustainability has been used, and it was used in the context of forest management. So in Malaysia, the sustainable forest management practices that was based on the selective management system. Basically, you're talking about the term sustainability means to never harvest more than what the forest can generate. So that's the first idea of sustainability that was coined in Germany 200 years ago. And the translated term in English appeared in the mid-19th century. So over the time, the meaning of words, evolve and change to fit specific needs. And I will not be, explaining about this forest management practices because now we are talking more about ESG and the concept of sustainability and how do we do, and how it has evolved over the years, basically. Throughout the years, the SMS, what I talked about just now, this was started to be practiced in 1978 in Malaysia. So it's not new also in the forestry industry. However, the understanding and the what sustainability means and sustainable development has evolved and developed. And in the 1980s, I think most of you would be more familiar with the term sustainable development, which was first introduced in the report called Our Common Future, also also known as the Brundtland Report in 1987. That was released by the World Commission on Environment and Development. So the concept of sustainable development was then introduced, and the report described how it could be achieved. So basically, sustainable development in 1987 then is understood as the idea that human societies must live and meet their needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So that's the official definition of sustainable development. And we were talking about female representation in decision-making positions earlier on. You might be aware that, or maybe you're not. The name Brundtland is actually taken from the name of Dr. Gro Harlem Brundtland. She's a female actually, and she was the youngest person and the first woman ever to hold the office of Prime Minister in Norway. So I suppose it's quite timely now, that we're talking about, gender, equality and having a better representation of female, and the fact that sustainability was also first made, popular by a female as well. So that is quite interesting anecdote, I think, to raise. For certification, basically, and how forest management was approached was also then changed, with this new concept of sustainable development, where we're talking about, all these three pillars of sustainability, and for certification then, for forestry, after the UN set in 1998, it was then decided that sustainability should not only talk about sustainable yield, but also have to take into consideration all the other aspects of management of a forest or natural resources. So in the early 90s, then a lot of all these different certification schemes were initiated and developed, basically to guide businesses, especially the forestry industry, on how the forest resources should be managed. Again, at that time, forestry was still the pioneer in terms of implementing sustainable development, or trying to adapt or adopt the concept of management and utilization of natural resources that takes into account the needs of the future as well. So that's where we came in as a MTCC in 1998. We were established, and we have reviewed our vision as well. Our vision is we wanted to create a nation. We want to have a nation that appreciates and internalizes the full value and contribution of forests towards global sustainability. So we basically appreciate and acknowledge the role of the local, management of resources, and that, and we cannot be separated, from what the global does, and everybody has to play our role together in ensuring, a more sustainable future for the planet. So what we are doing is we are committed to strengthen the MTCS to realize the full value and contribution of forests, through SFM, as well as chain of custody certification. So we basically take the bigger concept to a smaller pieces where we can actually implement it and try to guide practices in actually provide the standards and improve practices through certification. So just very quickly, our component of the M2CS, we have two components: the forest management certification, which is a process that leads to the issuance of certificate by an independent party, and the chain of custody certification, basically a process to evaluate and tracking wood products from certified forests. But of course, even over the years, we were established in 1998 and we have been around for over 20 years. So even how the practices have also evolved, rather than just evaluating and tracking wood products, even the practices within the manufacturing companies as well are being improved along the way. So we have two standards, basically, the forest management certification standard and chain of custody certification standard that we actually adopt from PEFC. We use the COC standard that is developed by the Program for Endorsement of Forestification, MTCC being a member of PEFC. So we make use of the COC standard developed by PEFC. Whereas for the forest management certification, we actually developed it, as taking into account the local conditions, the local situations, and expectations. So this is a local standard that is applicable specifically for Malaysia. So these standards take into account all these different aspects of sustainability and sustainable development. A quick overview of what contains in our forest management standard: compliance with laws, tenure and use rights and responsibilities, indigenous people's rights. So these are the social issues, these are the governance issues, matters, basically not issues, aspirations on what we need to achieve, or what a forest manager need to do to ensure that they comply with the standards. So these are the principles of the standards. And indigenous people's rights, community relations and workers' rights. So these are the social aspects, basically. Benefits from the forest, social, environmental impact. So we're talking about the environmental more than just, the forest resources. We are also talking about the ecosystems, and this is the ecological integrity of the forest ecosystem. So these are also taken into account. And management plan is one of the key requirements for certification, basically that helps in governance, in how a forest management is governed. So there has to be a strategic plan in terms of ensuring that all the practices and activities that are going to be conducted in a given forest areas has been considered, carefully and well thought of, and all the resources have been taken into account in terms of managing the resources in a given forest area. Monitoring assessment, of course, is part and parcel of good governance. Maintenance of high conservation value areas, that's basically, giving a higher importance of certain areas with particularly important conservation value. So I noticed that we also have, NGOs from WWF, the FSC. I think also in the list of participants. I'm very happy that we are also supporting the work of MTCC. These principles were developed based on FSC's principles and criteria at the beginning of MTCC's development. So there are a lot of similarities between the MCNI, there's the standard that we use, the Malaysian criteria and indicators. So the MCNI is very similar to the standard of FSC. Of course, throughout the years, there has been a bit of changes here and there, but in terms of the principle, it still maintains almost the similar, requirements. And quickly on the progress of certification that we have currently in Malaysia. For certified forests, by the end of September 2021, we have 5.6 million, sorry, Kedah masuk. So Kedah actually, this is by 1st October because Kedah was recertified on 1st October. So the total certified areas under MTCS is 5.6 million hectares. basically covering 23 forest management units, which is a natural forest. That's the bulk of the certified forests are, natural forest, and 9 forest plantation management units covering about 140,000 hectares. So you can see the distribution of the certified forest areas in Peninsular Malaysia and Sabah and Sarawak. So increasingly, we have received a lot of new forest areas are being, certified in Sarawak, particularly, basically. So perhaps I could just explain a little bit about the forest management unit in Peninsular Malaysia is based on the state forest management unit. So the scope is indicated, and the scope is basically confined to the permanent reserve forest of the state forestry department, and the state forestry department that manages the forest areas are the one that are, given the certificate. Whereas for Sabah and Sarawak, a concession license are given out. So the companies who are given the license are the ones who will be, who would submit the application to be certified, and so certification is granted to those companies who have applied, and of course through the third-party certification audit. We have 2 third-party certification body that conduct audit under the MTCS, which is the SIRIM KOS International Sunjat Berhad, and a control union who are accredited to conduct forest management certification audit. So a lot of people do not understand that MTCC is not the body that grant certification. We provide the framework to allow third-party certification scheme standard. However, certification bodies, third-party, as I mentioned earlier, SIRIM and CU, they are the ones who would be conducting the audits, and they are the ones who will be making decisions whether or not this forestry departments or concessions holders fulfill all the requirements of the standards before this forest managers are awarded the certificate. And we also have, in addition, there's some overlapping, but the total FSC certified area would be around 118,000 hectares covering 5 FMUs. I think Adrian is one of the participants. You can also, add if there is anything, any new, information about the progress of FSC in the country. With regard to the certified companies under the MTCS, we have 381 companies that have been issued with PFC chain of custody certificate. That's covering about 12% of the total timber companies in Malaysia. So we still have a lot of work to do, basically, to reach out to the companies, to also apply for certification. And oh, I did not put that. Okay, sorry, that's silap sikit sequence. Okay, just to give you an idea how along over the years, how the market has responded, to the requirement for sustainability, and how the market has required that certain sort of certification or certain sort of a verification about the sustainability or responsibility, the status of the companies in terms of how they conduct their business. And this is apparent in the number of products that are currently now being traded, and the companies who came in to apply for certification has grown from just sawn timber, producing sawn timber, to now we have a lot of companies producing a host of other types of products also requiring certification. So this is an indication that the market is now expecting more and more from the industry, and status quo is no longer an option to continue operating, basically. And I would just like to go back to this slide just to give you an idea, overview. Out of the total world's forests, 4.06 billion hectares, there's only about 13% out of the world's forest is certified. So basically we can say that, there's still a lot of forest areas that are not certified, and basically that nobody, well, not to say that nobody knows what's going on, but we can say that only 13% is under a third-party certification that is audited and assessed, and we can confidently say that these areas are sustainably managed, and that is very little. Basically, on 13.5% of world's forests has been certified. There's still a lot more work to do to ensure that the rest of the other forests, are also being managed sustainably. And out of this 13.5% of world's forests, only tropical forest only covers 1.03% of the world's forest is only the certified forest covered only 1.03% of the world's forest. So it's very even smaller in the tropical context. And out of the there's a typo sikit. Out of this 1.03% of the world's forest, MTCC contributes over 12%. So in a way, I'm just saying that Malaysia has implemented, sustainable forest management through the selective management system since 1978. And of course, the way the forest is managed has evolved and has been improved over the years. And now with the implementation of MTCC, we cover basically almost 50% of equivalent size of permanent reserve forest in Malaysia. And so basically we have done quite a considerable amount of work, and I suppose our stakeholders have been very supportive, and in Peninsular Malaysia, all the state forestry departments basically, even though certification is still mandatory, but policy-wise, certification has been included in a number of national policies with regard to, biodiversity policy, with regard to the national forestry policy. So certification has been, etched, has been put as one of the requirements to improve forestry practices for the country. And all these efforts, through certification have been recognized in a number of other countries and initiatives, in terms of the procurement assessment committee, or, the procurement policies of a lot of other countries in terms of fulfilling the legal requirements for trade. So certification has been able to provide that confidence about sustainability and responsible, management. So that's basically a quick cap, not very quick, I suppose, a cap on what MTCC has done in terms of sustainable development for the forest industry. And now we're talking about the new, since from sustainability to sustainable development, and now we're talking about ESG. What is it? Is now being talked about by everybody. What is ESG? How does it affect our forest industry? How can the forest, are we already doing enough? So this is why I'm calling my old friend, Miss Pang Oi Cheng. We have worked together previously as well. We have conducted, co-organized, a series of the Malaysian Forest Dialogue that were conducted from 2006 to 2011. So there was about 5 or 6 series of the Malaysian Forest Dialogue to talk about how the forest, industry can implement sustainable, development in a more holistic manner. So I have basically known Oi Cheng for a long time. And she is very, capable and, very experienced. So Oi Cheng is an executive director with the governance and sustainability team of risk consulting practice in KPMG. So she has 30 years experience in the areas of sustainability and environmental consultancy in the Asia Pacific region. She has managed and delivered non-financial management frameworks to numerous regional public listed companies in various sectors, including construction, oil and gas, manufacturing, multi-sector conglomerates, engineering, petrochemical, multimedia. So she has a vast, experience in the field of sustainable development. And so what I have asked, Oi Cheng to share with us, what does she think about, the certification aspects in terms of how can have we done enough to improve the requirement, or have we done enough to fulfill the ESG requirement, or what is ESG really that is the buzzword that we're talking about, or what more can we do, or is it, so hopefully it's enough, but let's hear from Oi Cheng. So I would like to invite Oi Cheng now to deliver her presentation on ESG in the timber industry. So thank you,
Siti.
To you, Oi Cheng.
Yep,
I'll just stop mine. Okay.
I will share my screen now.
All right. Okay.
Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. So with that introduction from Siti, I will take participants through very quickly on what is ESG, a little bit of history of how it all started, how it relates to sustainability, and also we'll go through the government requirements, and then we'll go through what is ESG management or sustainability management on a corporate context, and how does it impact companies as we go through the slides. So just without further ado, I will go straight into what is ESG. ESG in layman's terms for you all to understand, ESG, environmental social governance, is basically financial, the sustainability in financial aspects, right? How financiers consider sustainability issues. So they look at the performance of companies working in the environmental sector, the environmental sphere, together with the social sphere, together with the governance sphere. And to them, ESG is basically sustainability. And so the term first started in 2015, coined initially by financial institutions. What a surprise. So how does that relate with regards to sustainability? Right, ESG is the language used by financiers, by capital markets, by financial institutions now, and increasingly you find that insurers are also speaking the ESG language. Whereas sustainability, which was coined way back when, as Siti has noted through Brundtland, the Brundtland report has been around and knocking around for quite a long time. So basically, nobody could actually define what is sustainability. So we try to put it in buckets of to do better, right? To talk about terms with regards to corporate responsibility, and to talk about terms such as triple bottom line. And also, the good old term of doing good by being green, So there was no actual definition for sustainability until ESG came along. So when we now talk about sustainability, and in the modern day context now, when we talk about sustainability, ESG and sustainability is very much used interchangeably. And so if you find through some of my slides, we talk about sustainability, we talk about ESG, basically the connotations are the same. It's just that ESG is more precise in that sense. And if you look at Schroders in terms of their definition, they said that to them, ESG, sustainable, responsible impact investing, and ESG investing are all the same. They all use it interchangeably. What is different is the way that they apply the lens in which they evaluate the targets, as in the reporters such as you, the companies that are providing reports and which they are interested in investing in. So that's the only thing that's different where that is concerned, because a different approach is used with regards to what they are looking at for different companies. So in terms of ESG considerations, we can actually break down E as to include all the environmental issues. That is certainly easy. Right, for a lot of companies, when we talk about implementation and when we talk about requirements, they consider environmental issues, sometimes separate from compliance issues, which then they put into governance. And in terms of governance, they look as part of corporate governance requirements, which compliance falls into. So in terms of governance and all, we talk about this good business behavior, anti-competitive, anti-bribery, and corruption, all things that we are used to in terms of a corporate governance basis. But when it comes to governance in the G part as well of ESG, what investors are looking at and what reporters should actually start looking at is how they manage environmental, social governance issues in a holistic manner for an organization. Because how you manage from a board perspective, how you manage from a management, senior management perspective, and then how is that cascaded down and then cascaded up within the organization forms the overall governance of environmental, social, and governance issues within your organization, and provides a holistic overview of what management is looking at in terms of managing these issues. So in terms of social capital, some of it will be familiar to you, such as, if you talk about certification requirements, human rights and community relations, and human rights in this case can be looked at in two parts, which is indigenous rights, if that impacts your business, or human rights with regards to the use and the employment of migrant workers within your organization, and human rights also apply to your employees, and for a lot of cases, some of them, a lot of companies then talk about employee labor rights and things like that. So these are what we mean by social capital. And at the end, also within the ESG context, we talk about business resilience, business model resilience, supply chain management, sustainable supply chain management, looking at environmental and social impacts from your supply chain. And we talk about the physical impact of climate change, of how that impacts your business model and how you have adjusted to meet these requirements. Now, for some of the participants here, you will be very familiar with some of these issues, where especially when you talk about it within the context of certification, or for other issues such as climate change and such. It brings an additional layer for which participants need to understand how it impacts with regards to ESG management and ESG performance and reporting, so that your investors, your financiers, and your insurers are able to take a broad view as to how you are managing this risk appropriately. In terms of looking at on a big global scale, the World Economic Forum does a report, survey of major companies in the world, and from there they build a world global risk map. And you will note that for the past, please note that for the past 5 years, environmental issues have actually become and taken the lead with regards to global risk. And over in 2021, impact from COVID-19 on livelihood and impact on infectious disease have risen to the top in terms of risk. So when we talk about risk and when we talk about ESG management, it is primarily to be looked at through the lens of risk management in this case. And through risk management, how has that been adapted within your organization and within the practices that you have to ensure that you first identify this risk, you manage this risk, you monitor this risk, both from an impact in terms of performance, impact in terms of reduction targets if you have, and looking at it from a financial perspective, and then the plan, do, check, act cycle then applies again in terms of managing environmental, social, and governance risk. Just a little something that's shown here with regards to the latest IPCC report. And this is important because it basically shows that the world is moving faster towards, or rather warming up faster than what we thought it would be initially projected. The sixth IPCC report has stated that our CO2 concentrations in the world globally is the highest ever. Our sea levels have risen at the fastest rate since the last report, which was I think 5 years ago. The Arctic Sea is at the lowest level in terms of ice. Basically, the ice is melting a lot faster. We're getting a lot more CO2, and we are getting a lot more glaciers retreat. So in essence, on the positive side, we could say we are exposing more land, which is available for exploitation. But what it means that what was there previously as snow and ice and all have become water. So impact is projected that it will create more issues with regards to our climate and our physical conditions with regards to rising sea levels and all, so meaning more floods basically. So what the IPCC also did was they did a scenario projection looking at a 1.5 world. if we are able to stabilize at 1.5 degrees, this is the impact, as in we will be able to contain the heating of the world to specific places. If we head towards a 2-degree world, the heating will just get worse. And if we tip over 2 degrees and head towards a 4-degree world, you will see both the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere will will get warmer. And what you will see is that for us in the equator, we are quite lucky. But if you see the upheaval that could occur in the Western countries in the northern hemisphere, and the impact from the southern hemisphere as well, this could mean more socio-economic migration issues and upheaval as well, which we in the tropics will probably have to manage and deal with at some point in time. So in terms of projection, in terms of managing climate change, it shows that no country, nobody, no corporation, and no organization can afford to ignore the strategies in terms of how climate change is being managed within your organization and also within your ESG programs that you have. Projected impact with regards to climate change in Malaysia. We projected to have less water. This is a report that was done in 2014. Unfortunately, we haven't had any latest report which was publicly published, publicly available since the 2015, and the last modeling was done by NARIM and the National Hydraulic Institute of Malaysia, and this is the findings that they have. And basically, we potentially could have less rain in certain parts of Malaysia. We could have more rains. Intensity of storms cannot be ignored. Monthly river flows in terms of water and all, that could be an issue with regards to water availability in the areas that we are familiar with. And when it comes to rising temperatures, our crops are going to be impacted because our crops have grown and evolved over the years to be productive over certain temperature ranges. And if there is an upward trend, then there will be impact with regards to how these crops will perform and also impact with regards to biodiversity. So these are things that we also have to be aware. In terms of ESG practices in Malaysia, just to take a quick overview, the STAR has summarized it quite nicely for me, and this is something that they reported in 2020. We have got FTSE for Good, which is our Malaysian Sustainability Index, which is tied to the Bursa, and Bursa basically runs the FTSE for Good for Malaysia. And it basically rates companies' public reporting with regards to ESG performance, sustainability performance, how you want to call it. And then they give you indication whether you have been accepted or been included into the FTSE for Good rating or not. And this, in a way, has encouraged a lot of companies to start reporting better with regards to what they're doing in the ESG sphere, right? We've also got the Sustainable Development Goals, which a lot of Malaysian companies also have started reporting with regards to sustainability reporting and how it ties in with the Sustainable Development Goals. But Sustainable Development Goals, we have to remember, are basically national goals, and they were agreed on a 5-year, 15-year basis. And we are due for this, this latest Sustainable Development Goals is due for renewal or review by 2030. And so how does companies, in terms of their ESG or social programs and environmental programs, how do they contribute towards national development and national achievement of SDGs? This is something a lot of companies have not been able to identify and link. Right, for forestry and for plantation companies, this is an opportunity because you have been working in the area for so long, right? And the SDGs definitely talk about biodiversity, talks about maintenance of climate, water, and things like that. So that's on the environmental sphere. And in the social sphere, it talks about reduction of poverty. It talks about indigenous rights and all of that, of which certification actually has already required a lot of plantation companies to take on board. Right, the latest development which has occurred, and we will go through this in a little bit more detail, is the latest requirement by Bank Negara Malaysia, which formed the joint committee JC3, basically JC3. Basically, it's 3 C's in this case, Joint Committee on Climate Change, by Bank Negara and Esg, and also involving Bursa as well as selected companies, financial institutions, both insurance and banks and all, to talk about how climate change risks should be identified and managed within our financial sector. So I'll go through a little bit with this detail. And it is important because as Bank Negara pushes financial institutions in Malaysia towards reporting on their climate risk and the financial implications, it means that for companies who are not able to demonstrate that they are managing their climate risk and not being able to report on their climate risk, there could be issue coming up in future with regards to access to capital, and also issue with regards to access to capital in this case. So it's important for reporters and companies to take note. And the issue then is, how do banks then look and convey this message and encourage industry, not just the big boys, but also the medium-sized SMEs and the SMEs and the smaller size companies which are not listed on Bursa. How do they encourage these companies to take and measure and monitor the climate risk as well? Because at the end of the day, Bursa listed companies are only that much. But in terms of operations and in terms of economic production and economic contribution, there's so many more companies that needs to be encouraged and needs to be aware of these issues. And so the management of medium-sized SMEs and SMEs in identifying and managing the climate risk then becomes even more important. Right. Bank Negara also has what we call value-based intermediation, which is basically encouraging Islamic-based institutions to start reporting on their ESG issues and how they manage it within the organization. Right, and Robeco Sam, which basically runs the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, one of the world's most difficult sustainability index, and you can only get on by invitation, has started actually doing national ratings, country ratings, probably about 2 years ago, and they rated Malaysia to be around 6 to 10 in terms of sustainability performance, and that's also based on what we report on our SDG report to the United Nations, as well as other indicators which they have developed. So in terms of this, in terms of the Sdg Index, which is developed by the Sustainable Development Solutions, which basically monitors the SDG reporting, we are rated not bad. We're somewhere around the middle, but we are rated below our peers like Thailand and Vietnam. But surprisingly, we are rated above Singapore, but unsurprisingly, we are rated above Philippines and Indonesia. So there are lots of pluses for us, but there's also a lot of things for us to do, as CT has noted, right? And the key sectors which are at risk with regards to ESG and particular climate risk is, not unsurprisingly, our agricultural sector, which is in forestry, palm oil, and agriculture. So these are key areas, but I could also add on to include utilities and oil and gas and all, because these are main contributors, and these are main contributors to climate change, and these are main users of resources, raw material resources within the country and also in the region. So it's important for us to know where we are and what we are doing. In terms of our sustainability journey, it's been around for some time. Bursa first started requiring companies to report with regards to FTSE for Good way back in 2015, when they came up with their sustainability, or what they call Bursa Sustainability Reporting Requirements. And now we also know that Bursa is looking at reviewing what these reporting requirements are. In the time that is come up between 2015 to now, sustainability reporting, or ESG reporting as it is known now, has unfortunately evolved into a situation where it became a tick box situation, where they look at what Bursa wants and say, okay, I will tick this, everything's in my report. And so it becomes a compliance reporting requirement. But when in fact, what Bursa has done in 2018 was to inform all public listed companies that when they report, they should follow the Global Reporting Initiative. And it takes away the tick box mentality, supposed to take away the tick box mentality, but somehow for the bigger companies, they have managed to evolve. For the smaller companies, this has become an issue. So in terms of reporting requirements for ESG sustainability has been around for some time. And at the same time, working in conjunction, these are not done in isolation. The SC, the Securities Commission in Malaysia, has also started to tweak with regards to ensuring that the board is able to fulfill and understand its fiduciary duty towards the management of non-financial risk or ESG risk in this case. Right, in 2019, we stated earlier, Bank Negara and the SC Point JC3, and as of this year, the JC3 released the climate change principles-based taxonomy, or known as the CCPT. And with the CCPT, this has required financial institutions, all licensed financial institutions in Malaysia. So it means the banks, the intermediaries, and also the insurance companies have to start looking at their climate risk. And the next step, according to our discussions with Bank Negara, is to see how financial institutions are able to identify their financial risk arising from the climate risk. So what it means for customers of the banks is your banks will be asking you, or even EPF themselves, who are not part of impacted by the JC3 requirements but have taken it on board, will be asking you about how are you identifying your climate risk, how are you managing your climate risk, and what sort of performance are you looking at. So these are things that banks have already started asking, and a lot of clients we speak to, these are things that they are already been impacting their performance. So in the latest release is with regards to MCCG, the Malaysian Code of Corporate Governance, practice area 4, which at the present moment is best practice only. But it requires boards to start thinking about setting key performance indicators and remuneration in relation to climate-related or ESG issues that they have to manage within the organization. So to go through this in a little bit more detail, the Bursa Sustain Report, the second edition, which is the 2018, looks in terms of sustainability governance or sustainability reporting at that time when it was 3 areas: economic, environment, and social. And now the language has flipped. It's now become environmental, social, and governance requirements, and they need to look at it from 3 areas, which is on the governance perspective. How are you governing your ESG risk? What is your business strategy with regards to incorporating ESG risk or non-financial risk into your business strategy? How are you managing this risk, and how do you monitor and measure your progress? And like I said earlier, the Bursa Sustain basically also asks companies to start using the Global Reporting Initiative, which is the most widely used framework for sustainability reporting in the world. So we've got the JC3, and like I said earlier, with regards to the release of the climate change principles-based taxonomy, or what we know as the CCPT, the JC3 at the same time is also developing more guidance documents and with regards to risk management, scenario analysis, and they I apologize, and they are asking companies to I apologize again. Sharon Tagandala, very sorry. Can you all see my screen?
I can see you, but not your
Silly
screen.
question, yes. Yeah. Can you all see my screen now?
Now, yes.
Yes?
Yes.
All right, okay. So I don't know what happened there. I will try and do this again. But ever since my last update on my computer, so it's gone a bit wonky. So I apologize for Sharon Tagandala technical issue.
No worries.
So we've got issues. I mean, where Bank Negara is concerned, they are working on asking companies, bank financial institutions, principally the banks now, to start reporting on their climate-related risks. And the insurance sector will probably come in next year. And they are looking at broadening engagements with the broader industry, financial industry, including KPMG and the other big 4, to talk about what else can be done. And they are deepening their technical capability program. So these are things that companies need to be aware of, because what Bank Negara is doing here is basically asking financial institutions in reporting on their climate risks, and then it's going to cascade down, like I said earlier. So it will come to a point where companies who are not able to demonstrate their climate performance and all that, there is a risk in relation to cost of capital. And you can already see this in the proliferation of economic instruments which are offered by certain banks. especially in the area of sustainability-linked loans or climate-related linked loans. So these are things that are important to take note. Right. At the same time, in 2021, the SC, the Securities Commission, had updated the guidelines on best practice for directors, board of directors, and looking primarily at sustainability issues, and also with regards to managing of sustainability risk and all. So board fiduciary duties is being tightened with regards to how boards should look at non-financial risk or sustainability risk in this case. And also the MCCG, like I said earlier, has released in this year, talking about the what board should do. Right, it is at the present moment best practice. We're not sure when that is going to come into effect, but from what we know, a lot of our clients that we are working with and we have a long-standing relationship with are already looking at how to incorporate that into their best practice, into their practices and their reporting requirements. And some of the clients that we are working with does not necessarily mean that they are public listed companies, big public listed companies as well. But it is what we call best practice, and it's something that if you are facing pressure from your investors to talk about what are you doing with regards to ESG management from a governance perspective, this is a good area for you all to consider how you want to improve with regards to ensuring board responsibility. So the 12 Malaysia plan has got two impacts with regards to what's going to come and how that's going to impact, and how that's going to impact with regards to Malaysia's performance and Malaysia's requirements on climate reporting. First of all, it's going to talk about reduction of greenhouse gas intensity. We're going to talk about managing natural resources, and also enabling government to function better. And the government has stated very clearly that they want to set up a low carbon, clean and resilient development. Now, how that's going to happen, we are not sure, but it will be focused on the circular economy. So when we talk about circular economy, it means that there is no waste. Waste is recycled or reduced or reused again through other parts of your business. So these are things to start thinking about. When is that going to come in? It's a very good question. Since at the present moment, we don't have any enabling infrastructures in place, like rules, for us to start implementing this. So this is an area in which companies need to keep an eye on, because in terms of promoting circular economy, there is great opportunity for cost reduction. So whether the country does it or not, it's a good idea to actually start looking at how you're going to reduce your waste, right? The other thing that we need to be aware of is the fact that the government has also said that they want to enhance the water sector. And in enhancing the water sector is talking about looking at an overall governance structure of water management. Because if we're going to look at the impact of climate change, it is in fact, even before climate change, you already know that Malaysia has water problems and water availability problems. So climate change is just going to exacerbate this. So this is something that is very important, and this is something that we have to start looking at, not even as waiting for the government, but looking at how we want to conserve and be more efficient in terms of our water use as well. Right. And then the next one is the government has also stated that they want to set up a domestic emission trading scheme. Again, with regards to when that's going to happen, we heard that it's probably going to happen by 2025, 2023, and we heard that it's certain agencies have already been tasked to implementing this. So what it means that when we talk about domestic emission trading scheme setting up, is that there's a very good possibility that price of carbon will be set in Malaysia. And if price of carbon is going to be set in Malaysia, then that will impact with regards to your tax. That will impact with regards to the financial evaluation that you have to do in terms of return on investment when it comes to looking at the added layer of including a carbon price into your return on investment calculations. So that's where it actually means. We also heard that the government is talking about, I mean, this was announced also in the news, that the government is talking about setting up a carbon price. And in setting up a carbon price, legislation in that regard is all going to come in. So how does the carbon price impact again, and how does it interact with the domestic emission trading scheme? That is a very good question, because at the present moment, we don't know what the mechanisms are. But these are things that we know that are happening. And these are things, once it happens, will have implications with regards to corporate value, will have implications with regards to corporate performance and profit and loss, because these are talking about climate related carbon taxes and things like that, and impacts with regards to how you do your future development evaluation as well, because that's another layer of complexity that you have to look at. So all this is driving is that companies, and also our Bursa itself, and for a lot of companies here, if you are public listed companies, you will know that your directors have been attending trainings conducted by Bursa on the task force of climate related financial disclosure. Again, this is another financial related mechanism that has been brought up. And basically one day after Katrina, financial institutions looked up and said, oh, I have to start understanding what my climate risk is, because I don't know what financial implications that might have. So the TCFD was then born. And the Bank Negara requirements and all basically follows along the same principle, which is identify your climate risk, right? Identify your climate risk, know what your governance structure is, how have you managed with regards to your business strategy, look at what financial implications that you have within your climate risk, and then do matrix and targets. Now, this is the simplified version, because within the requirements of the TCFD, more complexities lay, as in we put the requirement to do scenario analysis, but for the purposes of the audience today, we cannot go into that too much detail. But if you so wish, you can contact me anytime. So these are things that are important, and we may be heading towards reporting towards TCFD requirements. For the bigger companies, definitely your investors and your international shareholders and your customers will definitely be asking you, what are you doing in this sphere, in this reporting sphere, and how are you planning to start reporting? For the smaller companies, if you are part of their supply chain, climate risk also comes from the supply chain. You will be required to start reporting on your climate risk as well, and vis-a-vis your carbon footprint and how it impacts your product. So these are things that are important, because everything that has been stated here and everything that has been identified here has implications not just for the organization, but also for your value chain. And this is just talking about potential legal requirements or legal requirements that have mandatory requirements that have already come into being. So this is a little bit of the requirements of TCFD. Now TCFD has got a reporting element to it, but the nuances behind the reporting elements, it's a lot more complex than what we do for normal ESG reporting or Bursa reporting or GRI reporting. So these are things that you can report to, but at certain point in time, you will need to be able to demonstrate that you have done your scenario analysis and you have looked at how you identified risks and opportunities as you move through your value chain, and as you move from now, which is 2020 up to 2050, let's say, for example, that's the time frame that you've done your scenario analysis for, and what sort of time purchase are you looking at, and what sort of risks are you looking at, and what sort of opportunities that you have. So these are things that are coming. And what we are finding out also for a lot of the bigger companies, the financial impacts and how it impacts with regards to financial reporting is also occurring. Can I request the participants to turn off your mic, please? Thank you. So these are things that are occurring, and these are things that are coming. So what is happening in terms of the global sphere, and how are companies responding to this? Every 2 years or so, KPMG runs a survey, and we just did our last one in 2020. So next year will be the next one. It's called The Time Has Come. And we talked about how we look at how companies are reporting in terms of sustainability reporting around the world. And so we found that 80% of companies is reporting worldwide, 10 countries rated highest, and Malaysia is actually one of them. And of the most reported guidance documents is the GRI, right? In terms of climate risk, a lot of companies have already started reporting on TCFD requirements, and they have already started, a majority of the companies have also started on reporting their carbon emissions. This is on a global basis, right? You've got to remember that. And also what's happening is, like I said earlier, a lot of companies, including companies in Malaysia, have started reporting on their SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. However, like I said, the SDG goals are basically for countries. So when companies start reporting on how they support the SDG is very much unbalanced and disconnected, right? For basically somebody went through all your sustainability programs and said, nah, this fits with SDG, or let's put the SDG requirement there. But it doesn't relate with regards to what you want to do to support the SDG goals, to support the nation towards the SDG goals. So there's no connection in that case. And if you're talking about SDG from a plantation, there's many areas in which you actually can contribute. So what we ask is for companies to start looking at it from a deeper understanding of what it actually is, not just look at it from a compliance reporting requirement. The sustainability reporting, ESG reporting, all has very important impact, and we will go through that in a while. But let's just look in terms of global trends in terms of reporting. Globally, where Malaysia is, we did last year, we went from 2017 in 97%, 2020 99%. Hopefully next year we will probably get to 100% for the country. So we are doing pretty well, and primarily because it is a compliance reporting requirement. But what we also find is that the level and the quality of reporting between the top 100 companies and the bottom 200 companies for us at KPMG, when we do our research, is also very variable. The top 100 companies, which are on the FTSE for Good, are striving to do better and are striving to report with regards to the initiatives that they have in place, which is basically they are really doing things within the organization. But for the bottom few hundred companies, it's very much a compliance reporting requirement. So what we see is that there are companies that can report 4 pages of sustainability performance compared to companies who are reporting a sustainability report. I'm not saying that a sustainability report is the proper way to go, but you can see the differential in terms of quality of reporting and the reporting information. In terms of global reporting requirements, forestry companies are doing quite well. In 2017, 77% reported were from the forestry and pulp and paper sector. And in 2020, 80% it's already there. For us in Malaysia, I think we do our fair share as well in terms of reporting, primarily if we are public listed, because we are required so by Bursa. This is a little bit of research that we did by KPMG in Malaysia, and this has not yet been published, so you're probably one of the first few people to see this. We surveyed 200 companies of the top 200 companies of PLCs in Malaysia. And if you look in terms of reporting, the top 10 reporting requirements go from governance, which has the highest number of percentage, right down to waste management, which has the lowest number of percentage where we talk about reporting requirements. And climate change is only 4%. So variable in terms of quality, variable in terms of the issues reported as well. So these are things that we should note, because local communities, there are great opportunities for plantation companies. Water management, again, great opportunities. Biodiversity, again, great opportunities. Do not treat the, basically what I'm trying to say is, do not treat the Bursa requirements or the GRI requirements as a compliance requirements. Financial institutions look at this information. And it's important that you understand that financial institutions look at this information so that they can evaluate what value do they place on the organization and whether they should invest in the organization or not. So this is a study, 2020 study done by institutional investors in the US. And we know that institutional investors in the US do look at on a global basis of what their targets are and what they want to look at. And you will see that in 2021, significantly amount of ESG investors are already considering ESG issues. And these are the things that they are looking at. And what we also have to understand is, as companies, we can have survivability of 100 plus years. KPMG in Malaysia is about 100 years, but the generation of people that comes after us or now have got different values, right? So we have to ensure that as companies, we are also evolving, and we are considering all these requirements so that we make the company better, and we ensure the longevity of the company. So in essence, also talking about sustainability. So these are things that are important. And investors and a lot of our clients also have started reporting on this, are not shy to reach out to board of directors. We've got CEOs here that tell us, oh, they receive requests for meetings from from investors from Finland and all of that. And when they have the meeting, this was pre-COVID, and the first thing, and pre-COVID means 2019. First thing they talk about is not, oh, what is your profit loss and things like that, but they talk about quality of life. They talk about diversity in the organization. So the conversation has basically changed, and the conversation is talking about ESG issues now, right? This is the first thing companies, investors talk about. They are not talking about your profit and loss, because they know your profit and loss, you are all geared towards profit and loss. So these are things that we have to start sitting up and realizing that these are things that investors are looking at. And also for us in Malaysia, the financial institutions and EPF themselves have already said that they're going to play the investor activist role, which is basically the same role as what your external investors are looking at as well. So if we can make ourselves more attractive in terms of how we divulge and how we divulge with regards to ESG management, then corporate value will definitely increase in this case. One of the companies that we work on, they get rated internationally, and after we engage with them and all, their rating went up from B to an A plus or double A, A plus, yeah. So it was an instant response with regards to the rating and their value, because of the quality of divulgence, or the quality of narratives that you provide in your report. So that's very important. As SMEs or as a Berhats and all of that, there are also ways. There's nothing to stop you from doing your own report as well. So the question is whether you see value in that. So the forestry sector, my last few slides, I'm going to stop after this. The forestry sector has been one of the fastest growing areas with regards to investors, and the areas that investors need to look at and which are concerned about is with regards to environment. And when we talk about forestry and we're talking about water use, we're talking about pollution, pesticides, and soil erosion. That has always been a problem. Right, negative and positive impacts of climate change. Now that is something new which plantation companies have to start thinking about. And we talk in terms of planting and harvesting techniques and resource management, which is something not new to you. Protection of biodiversity and ecosystem, also something not new to you. In terms of social aspects and all, we look in terms of land acquisition, community relation, labor and supply chain, also not new. In terms of anti-bribery corruption, maybe you might not address it within your certification requirements. You definitely have to address it as a legal compliance, because in Malaysia we have corporate governance requirements in terms of legal requirements. Quality management plans, you might not relate it to your certification systems, except maybe your OSHA certification if you have, right? ISO 14000 you might not relate, and other certification requirements of quality management systems that you may or may not have at other parts of your organization, but has not extended it to your plantation. But if you have that already, then well and good, right? In terms of grievance mechanisms, you also have, and that has been running around for some time already. So these are things that investors are looking at in terms of what they want from forestry sector to start reporting on. And it is important to realize that these are things that will impact their business. So with that, I will stop. I have got other slides. Sichi, you want to talk about certification, or is that enough already? I mean, you want to talk about ESG management and all, is that enough for the moment?
Well, I think I'm still listening very intently, very interesting, and just so many things that are happening
Yes.
outside of what we are so used to. So I think you can continue. Yeah,
okay.
please.
All right. Thank you.
We have time.
Okay, so the next thing what we want to talk is how you want to integrate ESG into your business, and how do you want to integrate it if you already have certification systems or certification systems like MTCC requirements running around already in your organization. I remember I said earlier, in terms of looking at business, integrating ESG in business, you have to have 4 main pillars, which is your governance, your risk management, your strategy, and your metrics. And when it comes to MCCGI, you already have that in place because you have legal compliance. Only thing is you need to expand it to include whatever that you do as an organization. So with this, a lot of us, we are very focused on the forest. If you don't focus on the forest, then you focus on the chain of custody, you focus on maintaining your certification from your chain of custody, from your value chain. So it's very discrete and very siloed thinking in that sense. But when you talk about ESG, you have to expand it to include, okay, this is my forest, this is my customer. How do I take a broad view of managing all of this within the context of governance, risk management, strategy, and matrix, right? For the bigger companies, you're already doing this as part of your enterprise risk assessment process. You're doing it as part of your stakeholder engagement process. Actually, for all companies, you already have risk assessment process and all of that. So the thing is, where are you lacking when it comes to the ESG consideration, particularly where your investors are looking at? And how do you broaden it to include all these issues? So the chart I showed earlier, where areas where you're probably not reporting enough on in terms of the certification, and also then in terms of your ESG reporting requirements, I see only 3 main areas, and you might see as broader and more complex than that. You're probably right. But in terms of water use, in terms of impact on watersheds and all of that, like I said, remember, climate change is impacting. Excuse me, I'm looking for my. Yep. Okay. Sorry, climate change is happening. We all know that. There's global data to show that Malaysia will be impacted. We can't run away from that. So how are you identifying the preservation of your forests and your forest plantations? And we are not talking about small little hectares, right? We are talking about thousands and hundreds and thousands of hectares, which could be impacted severely, which means then your sustainability of your business then is impacted if you don't have a forest water management plan in that sense. And it has to be a forward-looking plan, right? And with regards to water, it's also related with regards to climate impact. So how are you going to adjust for the impact of high storm intensity, for example, right? How are you going to adjust for the fact that certain parts of your forest could be inundated permanently under increased water rise, flooding basically, and then certain parts of your plantations could be impacted through drought? Have you mapped this out? So there is no way that we can avoid understanding and managing this risk. So the first step is, how are you going to start reporting on these requirements, and how are you going to expand it to show that within the context of what you're doing here, and you already have a framework. Basically what I'm trying to say is you have a framework of certification already. So there's no need to talk about building another framework on top of the framework. So use what you have in terms of the framework, because these are also all built on Plan, Do, Check, Act, right? You have to understand what your risks are. You have to have processes and procedures are. You have to have programs, monitoring, and then you have to check. And then you have to report. You already have all of that. So use that system to expand it to include climate risk management and water use, more on a perspective of resource retention, and then expand your waste management requirements more in terms of waste reduction, waste savings, or waste sales, or whatever, rather than throwing away. So you could expand your environmental impact, which is now very focused on the forest. If I were just to look at the forest management part of it, right? To expand that to include how does it impact with regards to climate change? How does that impact with regards to water use? Climate impacting on water use and all that. You already have the programs. You just need to take it a few steps further so that you actually have the processes in place. And it is not such a leap, because We've got clients who use the existing management systems like ISO 14000 to expand it to include ESG management because the elements are already there. And the worst thing that you can actually do for your company is to introduce something new, because I can tell you, having done this for a long time, change management is the hardest institute in any organization, whether you're big or whether you're small. And having the least number of steps required to change is probably the fastest way of doing it. So use what you have. And that's my suggestion in that regard. So I will skip through to the chase in terms of hang on, yeah. I will skip through the chase. I've got lots of slides, as you can see. I will skip through the chase. In terms of embedding ESG in the forestry and as a forestry business, if you look in terms of your business strategy, right? What companies are looking for and what investors are looking for now and banks are looking for is that you have a forward-looking view with regards to how your company, in terms of business strategy, don't ignore the manager selection. Sorry, I forgot to edit that, is to look at how you take consideration forward-looking issues and then looking at what the headwinds are. And you probably tell me you do that, but there is no specific lens with regards to climate change. There is no specific lens with regards to water use and all, because we look at historical data, right? A lot of the companies that I speak at, when they evaluate the risk, they look at historical data. They tell me, oh, I look at 100-year floods, I look at 100-year water availability. But what's happening as the climate change and as temperature rises, the 100-year historical data don't apply anymore. We are looking at 1 in 500 year or 1 in 1,000 year event now with regards to flooding and with regards to storm events. So it has to be forward looking, right? So in terms of embedding your ESG into your strategy, a forward-looking statement and forward-looking view has to be taken into consideration, which is why in terms of the TCFD, they are looking at scenario analysis. So how far forward-looking are you? What have you considered in terms of your future business and in terms of your future requirements as a business as well? So it's an inward, out. What do you require for your business to sustain? And what are the impacts that's happening outside in view that is going to impact on your business? And then you craft a business strategy moving forward from that. That's important, right? Having responsibility, we talked about the MCCG, the TCFD also talks with regards to board responsibility, senior management responsibility. I'm not saying that you should have a CSO, a Chief Sustainability Officer. The best strategy is who within your organization is best to look at and understand the impacts of this, right? If you're talking about a small company, it usually falls upon the CEO and the CFO. If you're talking about bigger size public listed companies, then board risk committees are usually the best organizations to look at it, because this is simply very much a risk management issue, right? Climate risk is something that is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger that we have to start looking at, right? And so in terms of responsibility and understanding what the requirements of your organization in terms of training, in terms of asset management, right? As climate, as temperature rises, as flooding occurs, the risk of stranded assets become very clear as well. So if you have plantations or you have mills or whatever next to the sea, what is your risk? As you go down the years and as sea level rise, are you going to end up with a stranded asset? And if you are going to end up with a stranded asset, what is your strategy to deal with it in the long-term basis? And what is your financial risk that you have to, what is the financial provisions that you have to make in your books to make sure that you are not impacted as a business, right? So these are the things that are important. Risk and value creation is very important. How you identify both business and non-business risk, your ESG risk, how is that being integrated? And together with that, you look at business strategy and then you look at operational risk at a granular level. And what do you need to monitor and measure with regards to KPIs and matrices that you need to have in terms of demonstrating that you are, you are managing and you are reducing and adjusting to the climate change so that you are able to maneuver your business through these challenges that you have. And then lastly, and the last of it is looking at how you want to disclose. So these are things that are important, and these are things that should be considered as an organization. There is a chart that I have provided in terms of what you need to consider, what's the questions that you need to ask. And it's good that if you are able to go through this. I will send the slides on to Siti so that she's able to disseminate among the participants. And lastly, also not to be ignored is where there is risk, there's also opportunities. And for a lot of you guys who have been running plantations for a long time, you know already, we've been talking about carbon credits and all. If Malaysia does develop our domestic emission trading scheme, there's an opportunity for you to convert your plantations, which basically runs for a very long time, into carbon credits. And in fact, you don't have to wait for the domestic emission trading scheme. You can actually start doing that already. So the choice is up to the participants. And with that, I will pass back to Siti. Thank you. Any questions?
Awesome, thank you. Thank you, Ocheng.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, there's a lot of things that out there talking about ESG, and a lot of guidelines or a lot of parameters that have been put in the financial sector and all this other sector that are now looking in deeper into what are the requirements all these different businesses need to fulfill to continue to operate basically. And as you said, the forestry sector is already in the basically has done a number of the requirements already, and it's probably much easier to improve on the system rather than creating a new system. However, one thing that we see in the forestry industry is that there's still a lot of misconception, or there's still a lot of misunderstanding about the nature of the business itself, the sustainability part of the industry, and when you talk about the management of natural forest, and the potential to obtain credit out of managing natural forests is basically zero. It's it's basically because when you have done well over the years, and it's compared to other nation who has cut off the forests, and now they're just replanting, and now they can get credit out of it. But for a country who has been practicing sustainable forest management for a very long time, there is no credit that we can we can actually get. So what sort of motivation or incentive that you see can be explored from the industry?
The thing is that when you cut down your forest, you don't cut it down entirely. If you got 100,000 hectares, you can't cut down 100,000 hectares entirely. You have to cut it down phase by phase or parcel by parcel. So, and your growth rates are also going to be parcel by parcel. So let's say, for example, you cut down this, and then the next year or 5 years later, you cut down the next block. So the growth rate difference is 5 to 10 years, let's say, for example. So when he talks about carbon credits, the thing is that carbon credits now, the last that we talked about carbon credits, it was on a government prescribed, what we know as the Clean Development Mechanism. Now, what has grown out of that is that we now have a very thriving voluntary carbon market. So basically, you don't have to subscribe to it for 100 years or whatever. Now you can, or 25 years, you can do your credits, and you say, I can provide this credit for this amount of time. It's up to the credit provider to basically the plantation to say, my credits, I want to have it for certificate and available for trade, or before it's retired, and I want to do it for 10 years or 15 years. So you can actually do that now. So you can actually do credits for each parcel of your forest that you have, your sustainably managed forest, your SFM basically, right? And from there you will be able to get some revenue to be able to replenish back into forest management. Because I remember the conversation that we had a long time ago, Siti, when we were young and skinnier. Right?
We're still young.
That's very true, but not so skinny. Okay. Where we talked about forests, being able to sustain themselves because you plow so much money into replanting the forest and all of that. Then you have to manage the forest. So this is a form of possible revenue and possibly also alternative form of revenue that a company can subscribe to. The other way of looking at it is if you're not talking in terms of carbon sequestration or carbon credit, is whether you want to do a bond out of your whole forest as well. That's also possible now. So the awareness and the understanding of ESG and what sort of financial institutions instruments that can be developed has now is now a little bit more sophisticated. Not to say that it's so great that. I mean, the accountants and the financial people are still catching up, but at least they are more advanced now, right? So those are the opportunities that are, and I'm very glad to say that I'm not a financial person. I'm not an accountant or a financial. Right, so those are the opportunities and all. Just for your information, Indonesia just last year managed to get 1 million hectares of their forest under carbon credits, and they got it through B2B agreement with the Swedish or Norwegian government, and that was worth something like 50 million over X number of years.
I thought Norwegian government tarik balik.
No, not that I heard that. Tarik balik. I don't know.
The 1 billion.
No, not so much. About $50 million or something. Not so much. They probably tarik balik and then came back with a smaller one.
Okay, right.
There is opportunities. It's just that the only thing is you have to do it right now.
Yeah. But when you talk about well, I would like to open it up for the participants. I mean, we have a number of participants, close to 100. And then I noted that, and Oi Cheng, and it's not just Malaysian actually in the participants list. We also have our colleagues from Myanmar, from Thailand. I think you would have noticed. So it is quite an international audience. But when we talk about the forestry industry, anybody who wants to ask question, please feel free. You can unmute yourself and ask questions. But coming back to the forestry industry, as you know, majority of the companies, the forestry companies in Malaysia are all small, medium industries. There's a handful that is, publicly listed. And the publicly listed ones are pretty good in terms of reporting on their achievements, but the small and medium industries, how do we ensure that they do not get left out? They do not have as much resource as the public listed company. So how can we actually get the small and medium industries into the game of ESG? But whether is there any what do you call that, resources available that they can tap into, guidance, apart from what you have said, Bursa and things like that?
If they're interested to look, there's actually a lot of resources out there, especially for ESG or sustainability integration for SMEs. There is a whole sector that's available as resources for SMEs. Unfortunately, not in Malaysia. Right. The thing is that, just to let you know, when I first started in terms of sustainability, the first company I started on was not a PLC, was not a Berhad. It was a Sdg Berhad. And with the Sdg Berhad, when they adopted it and when they started doing, I worked with them for 6 years. The reputation and the value that they caught from their sustainability reporting, allowed them to expand internationally, and also allowed them a lot of credibility and reputation enhancement. So the question is whether it's a question in two situations. As an SME and as a business owner, right? You have to understand the value of this, right? If you don't understand the value of this, then it's not going to take you anywhere, because what you put in is what you get out from it, right? I'm not saying also that you have to spend a lot of money on this. You have to understand, basically, the writing is already on the wall, where bankers and where insurance people are concerned. I mean, I've spoken to a whole lot of my clients and also my non-clients. A whole lot of them are already being asked by their financial institutions what they're doing with regards to climate. And they are beginning to have to take steps to report. And this has implications as well, because ASEAN, on an ASEAN level, is also talking about setting up an ASEAN taxonomy to look at climate reporting. Singapore has just basically taken the easy way out and told financial institutions start reporting on TCFD. Which means if you're going to start reporting at TCFD, then Singapore banks and all their customers in the region will also be impacted already, right? So if the ASEAN taxonomy does come up, Malaysia being the first, right? ASEAN taxonomy does come up. What is the implication for the whole of ASEAN? And Myanmar and Thailand and all of that is included, and Vietnam and Cambodia and all are included as well. So these are things that companies have to start thinking about. Take it one step at a time. So what is the most pressing concern now for SMEs and medium-sized SMEs? The banks are also very worried about it. What are you doing with your climate reporting, right? What do you need to start with regards to climate reporting? There's also a lot of resources out there already, and there's a lot of websites actually offering tools in which you can start adopting to report. The only thing is that I always advise that if you're not sure, you can reach out. Not all consultants will charge. Right. So the thing is that, if you don't understand, ask. That's the most important thing. Right. We don't know, you don't know until you say you don't know, if you know what I mean, right? And it's better to do the right thing and do it right rather than do it and then find out that actually the data cannot be used. And that has happened for quite a few companies as well. So understand, research. There's, like I said, a whole lot of information that's already out there. And see what you can break it down to rational points, right? What do you need to tackle first? So first, financial institutions all very worried about carbon footprint. So start looking at your carbon footprint. So do that as the first step. After you do that as the first step, and you can show your financial institutions, they probably ask you how much money you spend here, how much money you spend there. Then start looking at them. So take that one step at a time. Don't do the whole thing all at once, because that is a recipe for failure, because you get frustrated because you don't know where to go and all of that. So break it down. If your biggest pressure is talking about climate, do climate change first. Then if your next biggest pressure is talking about human rights and all of that, then do human rights with regards to international reporting requirements. Because unfortunately, these are the two main pressures now in Malaysia. Can't be helped, because we were in the news from 2002 to 2021. Spectacular, right? And now it just came back in the news again with the latest thing that's happening. So it's embedded in our international psyche already. Malaysia has these two problems. Therefore, if you have international customers, these are the two questions that they will be asking. So you have to start reporting on it. But if you're already doing forest certification and you're doing chain of custody certification and all that, you already have the information with regards to social requirements. You already have the information with regards to labor requirements and all. Understand what you have, then start putting it in a reportable manner so that people can understand what you need to, what you have been doing to manage this. So do it on a bite-sized basis. Don't look at the overall perspective and say, I got to do everything. No, you don't. There is nothing in sustainability reporting guidance or even in the legal requirements that say you have to do everything at the same time. As long as you do it, and you do it in your own roadmap in your head, but hopefully you can document it and show people that you're working on it. That's the first step that you should start on.
Yeah. Thank you, Oi Ching. Yes, that's I think one of the things that is not the key, I would say, that is not the biggest strength of our people, basically, is documenting things.
Yes, correct.
That is our weakness, is basically to document things and to put it into publication and put it out there.
How important it is to actually have the pieces of paper of evidence.
Yeah, exactly. So that's something that we really need to impress upon our stakeholders, and of course ourselves as well. I know it's also something that it requires another capacity building altogether. It's a soft skill. The hardware, as in hardware.
But
the companies.
Participants also need to understand, when you get audited, it's not just on MTCC audits, right? You will get customer audits as well.
Mhm.
I know a lot of customers, international from Europe and from US, are now running a lot of meta audits, which is for human rights. Not just on let's say, for example, RSPO or MTCC certification, right? They are running their own international human rights audits and all. And then all these pieces of paper become very, very important in that case. Very, very important, because all it needs is, I mean, they're shown in the newspaper already. What you cannot produce the piece of paper, you just say here, say, right? Then they go and talk to your worker tell another story. True or not true story, don't know, because you don't have the paper. So you get in the newspaper, somebody report you to the US, kena lah. You know what I mean? So that's how it evolves. That's why documentation is so important, especially, you know, from an audit perspective, because they support basically what you're saying.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I think that you must have given so many information that our participants are still trying to digest, especially in the afternoon. and no one has any question. So yeah, I mean, it's very interesting, and we can continue with our discussion. And yeah, I intend to not use up, you know, the entire 2 hours. We do have some time if anyone wants to ask any more question. But I mean, you have given a lot of direction. You know, the key aspects that we are looking into now. You know, the climate change is the biggest issue, and actually our MCNI was just reviewed, it was just revised, and climate change, or basically carbon part of the forest management has been included in the standard, basically, and our stakeholders were asking, so what do we do, you know, what do we do with carbon management? You know, it's
calculating.
Exactly. I mean, it's a fairly new science, as you said. There is no infrastructure available yet in terms of, you know, all this.
Actually, for forestry, there is a whole set of guidelines on how to calculate carbon from the forest already, and from tropical and subtropical forest, including the carbon in the soil, carbon in roots and things.
It's here and there, but when you talk about the specific area of the forest, you know, management of a specific area, then there's a different science altogether, basically. Correct. Because each area has carbon in different ways. So there's another you know, investment in terms of trying to get all this data. Now we are expecting the forest managers to also become scientists, you know, and get scientists to help them managing. But that's part of the puzzle of improvement, you know, of improving the management system.
But that's where the timber industry can actually help itself by pulling together resources rather than treating each other as competitors. But in the area of certification or in the area of carbon, the pooling of resources helps share the burden and helps share the cost and helps share understanding of what needs to be done, right? Rather than treating each other as competitors in that sense.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Lau has a question.
However, how can we know how is green bonds such as carbon credit? Okay, green bond is not carbon credit, Mr. Lau. Green bond is green bond, carbon credit is carbon credit. Carbon credit basically is talking about your carbon. Let's say, okay, I'll give you an example. Your forest, you have a forest, and you say your forest you have calculated your forest to say that it has got 1 million tons of CO2, let's say, for example. And you know that forest that you have, you're not going to cut down for 25 years. So you can actually develop a carbon credit out from it to say that your forest is not going to be cut up, and you got 25 million, you got 1 million tons of CO2 to sell. Now, the broker that can come in can say, your 1 million ton, I cannot sell just like that, but what I can do is to develop little certificates, let's say 50,000 each of tons of CO2 for you to sell at different prices at different times of the market. So it becomes a commodity in that sense, right? That is carbon credit. Whereas for green bond is, I've got 100,000 hectares of forest. I've got 1 million tons of CO2. I'm intending to preserve this because my growth cycle for this plant is 50 years. So I can develop a bond for 25 years quite easily. Right, then you get audited with regards to your area of your boundary and how you're keeping your forest management to keep your trees there for 25 years. So that is your green bond. The bank will actually require you to get audited to make sure that you are preserving it there. For your carbon credit, the people who are brokering or selling it and giving you the certificate for your carbon credit, they will audit you as well to make sure that you are keeping that your 1 million tons is actually 50,000 is actually true. So you get audited. It's part of the process. Both is audited requirements. Only thing is, one is for the entire plantation, and the other one is broken up into little bite sizes, which you sell and broker at different markets, from what I understand. So you can sell it at different times for different price. And the thing is that with where we are now, we expect that carbon price to increase, right? Singapore has come up with their carbon price at $5 maybe a couple of years ago. Now they're saying they need to revise it upwards. So carbon price can only do one thing. It can only go up. However, when we talk about emission trading scheme, it is dependent on market driven. It's like a commodity lah. Too much of it, the price comes down. Not enough of it, the price goes up. So that's the difference between a green bond and a carbon credit, Mr. Lau. I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Usually my the participants of our webinar are very open and would like to switch on their video and talk to us, but this time I know we have more shy people. but anyhow, I think we have 10 minutes to 5. We have had a lot of discussions about ESG, and basically there's a lot of overlapping requirements, and I suppose the requirements under certification such as fulfilled at least 80% or 90% of ESG requirements, if not more than that even.
No, it's not talking about the requirements in this field.
Yeah,
in terms of demonstrating that you have a functioning program, you have to maybe focus more on the overall structure in a holistic manner. How is it working from your plantation to your mills to your distribution to your final product? So more of the more of the value chain that comes along, and how it presents risk and how it's being managed to you as an organization as a whole. So the overall holistic overview of risk management in that sense, governance structure of that.
Yeah.
But the rest of the issues, I will agree that you have most of it already, except for climate.
Of course, Mr. Moa, Cyril, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Oi Cheng, for a layman, if a company wish to, let's say, apply for carbon credits or wish to, start the process of getting access, being audited and all that. What are the steps? What are the initial steps that they should take? Who should they contact? Where to go?
Okay.
Give a breakdown in terms of the procedures.
Okay, hang on. I do have that slide. I just didn't share it. So let me share again. Okay, when you have a project or you want to do a project, and we're talking about it on a voluntary process, I'm not talking about the regulatory process, right? You need to first also start off with an idea note, which is basically a white paper or your business strategy, how you want to do this. So you write this down and then you talk about where your boundaries are, what the areas, what are the trees that you have, what is the CO2 emission that you're going to have, and the duration in which that you're planning to keep these trees for. So I'm not talking about your whole plantation. I'm talking about your parcel of plantation, one parcel of your plantation. You want to talk about it in terms of your whole plantation, then you have to have a forest management plan. This area you're going to cut at this time, this area you're going to cut at this time, then do a calculation of your carbon, your reduction, your carbon, your reduction. So that plan is more complicated. Okay, Cyril? So you need to do this. After you do this, then you talk about the design, basically how you want to do this. And then you look in terms of whether it is verifiable or not, whether your calculation makes sense or not. That's when you start engaging with a broker or you talk and start engaging with a credit ownership or a consultant. So there are 3 areas in which you can actually look to help you, right? There are some brokers that actually help you in terms of looking at all of this. There are some retailers that also help you in looking at all of this. So it depends. So your choice of brokers and your choice of retailers or consultants is very important, depending how they're going to help you. Because some of them will help you in terms all the way to sell. Right. So for example, a retailer, they help you with all of this, and then they take your credits, and then they reimburse you, and then they sell it for you. Or in terms of broker, they basically act like a stockbroker lah. It's not theirs, right? You give them the shares, and then they sell for you. They don't own it, right? In that sense. So it is up to you how you want to do this, and there's a whole gamut of services that's available. But what you cannot run away from is the one that's at the top lah. This is all yours. Right, this is your cost initially. This is your risk initially. So your project plan or your business plan, how you want to calculate, how you want to keep, how you want to cut. If you want to talk about 100,000 hectares, which just boggles the mind, which is way too big. Maybe think about something smaller to keep that. Then it will work that way. I hope that helps, Cyril.
Yes, thank you. Where to find this list of brokers and retailers?
There is a place called Ecosystem Marketplace. There's a website for this, or you can actually type gold standard, the gold standard on Google, and it will take you to that. The gold standard is also one of the areas in which they will go through. They have methodologies for this. In fact, the gold standard, I think, was set up by the WWF. So it's the most stringent and the most expensive with regards to carbon credits is concerned. You can reach out to WWF as well to help you with that.
Okay, thank you, Ai-Cheng.
No worries.
All right.
Stop sharing again.
Thank you. Do you have any more questions? Okay, Mr. Lau again. Is it industry applying what ISO 14,000 is a step can help to apply carbon credit?
Okay, ISO 14,064 is not for carbon credit, Mr. Lau. ISO 14,064 is the methodology to calculate greenhouse gas emissions. ISO 14064 is the same as the greenhouse gas protocol, which is basically telling you how to calculate your carbon footprint as an organization. So if you have a company, they tell you how to calculate the carbon footprint for your company, looking at scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. The carbon credit one is talking about very specific methodologies where we calculate carbon emissions from a tree or for your plantation, for example, and it involves actually quite complex science. So I will share my screen again. Can you all see my screen?
Can.
So it's basically asking you to calculate for your plantation the CO2 emission, which is what Siti is also talking about. That's where your certification has expanded to, right, for the forest. So what is in the canopy, what's in the trunk, what's in the little fall, what's in the roots, and what you need to take into consideration. That is for carbon credits. And the FAO has actually set up some methodologies already to calculate this, as well as our FRIM as well. Because FRIM at one time was looking at
LULUCF.
Yeah, or REDD plus, or what we call reduction, I can't remember.
Reducing emission.
Yes, from deforestation and
degradation.
Yeah, REDD plus now, that's what it is. Yeah. So these are different methodologies, Mr. Lam.
Question: MCNI certification already covered all aspects needed under ESG concept. In a way, it does. I mean, it requires a lot of thinking in terms of how a forest is managed, and all the requirements are there in terms of protection of environment with reduced impact logging, with protection of biodiversity, with protection of soil and erosion, water. So all those aspects are there for environment aspects. You've got also social aspects, consideration in terms of, OSH, occupational safety and health, all other aspects. So basically, Ai-Cheng has shown some areas just now with regard to, I suppose, there is not clearly indicated in terms of what do you call that, corruption, prevention of
climate
corruption.
risk, water and pollution.
Water is there basically, except that
look at it from
the science, it is not a detailed science.
Yes, you don't look at it from a water catchment basis and water preservation basis.
Yeah.
But now to answer your question also, what you also need to consider is in terms of, this is OG, it's a Finnish pulp and paper company, and they actually have their own plantations. You also have to think about how you want to do your corporate reporting in terms of how you do your risk management as well. That is important because one of the first things that investors look at, or potential partners look at, is how are you within your organization managing your ESG risk, in this case, which they've identified as all these things. And you can answer this, but you can't answer this if you have not set up a system to look at this. Yeah. And basically the MTCC, MC and I don't really ask you to do this.
Yeah, because how the forest managers sometimes approach each of the requirement, it's done separately.
Yes.
So that is one of the area where actually it has to be internalized, that everybody actually, I mean, with ESG is in a way,
it's broader,
and slightly broader than what is required. But it's all there, except that how detailed do you want to be, and how do you actually package it all together?
Pull the information together.
Yeah, how you package all together.
Look at areas that you need to improve. Climate change that has been included is basically on calculating. It does not address the risk in terms of how are you going to ensure a sustainable business from climate risk. So what MCCG amendments basically ask you to do, from what I understand, I stand to be corrected. This is just based on what I hear that you said just now, is basically asking you to quantify the carbon emission from your forest. If you're really going to quantify your carbon emission from your forest, based on the MCCG requirement, just take it one step and go certification, or go carbon credit, or go carbon green, talk about a carbon bond. You've already done it. Don't waste the effort. At least monetize it. But if you want to talk about looking at addressing the needs of your financial institutions, or that you are mitigating your climate risk, you need to take a forward-looking view in that case. It's a different perspective.
Yeah, it's one step at a time, as you said. We have to focus on what we can improve on, and carbon. We do have a requirement for climate positive, climate positive action. Basically in terms of that, basically is a risk mitigation requirement that you have to understand. So it's a matter of understanding really what are the risks that we are considering and then trying to address.
The only problem is with climate risk, I'm sorry to prolong this, I know it's already 5 o'clock, I'll just make this very quick. The only problem with climate risk is that it's not short term, it's long term. And a lot of companies that we are dealing with now looking at this, they have problems considering risk beyond 5 years, because they're so used to looking at business strategic risk on a 5-year basis. So they can't look beyond that. So it's a real paradigm shift for companies. But you see, the thing is with forest people, you are used to dealing with long term, so it shouldn't be that much of a problem. So with that, thank you. Back to you, Kiki.
Thank you so much. There's one more question. Last one. It's already 5 o'clock. How about RILC? Will it be implemented? What do you mean RILC, Mr. Asam? Reduce impact logging carbon? Maybe you can explain a little bit more. I suppose Mr. Arang will probably be from Sabah. I don't know. Are you from Sabah? Yeah, reduce impact logging carbon. So from Sarawak. Okay, sorry. Right, because Sabah has been doing a lot of work as well on carbon in forestry. So reduce impact logging. For carbon, I mean, it's part and parcel of the current reduce impact logging has considered, in terms of carbon, but it's not on explicit terms. It's very implicit. It's a matter of trying to reduce impact from logging. So part and parcel of the consideration, of course, when you protect the ecosystem, you also protect, the release of the emission of carbon and things like that.
It's very hard.
But it's,
For
so
logging camps, what do you look at? Generator,
So that's another thing. Yeah, that's,
what do you look at? So it's difficult.
It's very difficult, basically, the carbon climate positive action that we're looking at. So it's work in progress. I think everybody is still trying to understand what needs to be done, and let's all work together. And
better to collaborate rather than fight on this.
Exactly.
It's very big, and we need to do something.
Siti, one last question.
Yes, Cyril.
Oi-Chen, what about recycling?
Okay, recycling comes under circular economy, right?
But any carbon points that you can get?
Yes, you can, but it all comes down to how you want to calculate it. Let's say, for example, let's talk about RIL, reduce carbon in logging, right? If your carbon in logging plus your that's the best example is you have a tree. One tree is supposed to fully grown tree is supposed to be able to sequester, keep about 400 kgs of CO2. Say through its lifespan. So let's talk about 10 years old. Okay, but your CO2 emitted from logging is, let's say, about 200. So in essence, you've already used that tree up for 200 with regards to carbon already. So you cut the tree down, and then you have all the things up in terms of waste. And so you have to calculate how much those waste was arising, the calculation of the carbon from your logging, how much of it went to the log, how much of it went to the carbon. So as you can see, it can get quite complicated. So your waste, then you have to transport it out. Or you take the waste, if you burn it, it becomes even worse because you're adding to the CO2. And if you take the waste, and what you're going to do with it? So you have to take all that consideration when you talk about recycling. Who was the one who asked that question?
Cyril.
So I hope you understand the complexities when you talk about this. And when you talk about recycling. So if you take the waste out and then you lump it together with all the other waste, how are you going to apportionate the CO2 to that product? Okay. And that's the complication now of what we call Scope 3 greenhouse gas emission calculation.
Yeah, those are the devils in details,
yes.
Talking about all this. You say that the market, they say the market can provide all this, but when trying to access to it as another matter altogether.
Yes. Yeah, so the only thing that we can look at is what the Europeans are doing, because they have legislation that mandates life cycle assessment of products, life cycle of waste, and because they have legislation that mandate circular economy, the only thing to do is to learn from them.
Yeah. All right. Adi lagi. Okay. Last question. I thought I had 3 last questions already. Like to know carbon offset project, how intensity the carbon offset project can cover?
Okay, intensity doesn't cover with regards to carbon offset. Intensity covers with regards to your production of your product, the CO2 or energy that's used to make your product. So let's say, for example, what we talked about RIL in terms of the CO2 200 compared to your tree 400 per tree, then is per tree, then carbon sequestered is 200 or 50% per tree. So you try to keep it as that. That's your intensity. It doesn't go into carbon offset. Doesn't go into it at all. It just works with regard to your product and your process. I hope that answers your question, Mr. Lau.
All right. I think that's that answers the question. Thank you. All right. So I think we have terlajak sikit, 7 minutes. Thank you for everyone's patience, and also Oi-Ching, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom, and through your 30 years of experience in the sector. I hope all of us has obtained something new, some inspiration, or some new ideas on how we want to improve on how we do things, and how do we actually embrace sustainability in the broader scheme of things. And then at MTCC, of course, we are also you're looking at areas how we can provide further support, and where are the areas that we need to focus our work on in developing maybe additional guidelines or something. So this has been very helpful. So that's all for our session for today. We will have Cyril will be actually moderating one session tomorrow about the evolution timber products, certified timber products tomorrow. So please do attend our session again tomorrow morning. For those who are interested to follow, we have our webinar session throughout the week. So again, Oi Cheng, thank you so much for your time and for sharing.
Thank you for the opportunity. Stay safe, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Stay safe.
Bye.
Bye-bye.